All right, quick update on the Tony Romo OWI investigation and arrest. Romo was arrested last Thursday, July 23rd in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Not Texas, but the legal issues are almost identical to what we see in Texas DWI cases. After a traffic stop, the officer asked Romo where he was coming from, and he volunteered the golf course. Now, while he is a profile person whose appearances are photographed and recorded, as common folk, we would do well to not say things like the golf course or a bar. But notably, Romo did not sound slurred. When he was asked to step out of the vehicle, Romo asked to call his lawyer, but he was told no. It appears to me from the body cam that Romo began recording this interaction on his cell phone. Now, I don't know. That's just my speculation. However, he steps to the back of his truck, and at that point, he was handcuffed and placed in the police officer's patrol unit and was taken to the police station for the standardized field sobriety test. Upon arrival, the arresting officer told Romo they went through his bag and found some quote-unquote shooters. And Romo asked, yeah, any of them drank? The officer told Romo that due to his driving, coming from the golf course, an odor of alcohol, and the shooters that they had found, that he was under investigation for OWI, kind of like DWI in Texas. Sounds pretty weak to me. It was frustrating to watch the officer explain the standardized field sobriety test. She obviously was new because she read the instructions from a card and could not effectively communicate what she was asking of Romo, which caused a lot of confusion. There were 3 male officers that looked on during this portion of the investigation. The arresting officer asked Romo if he had had any head injuries or concussions. Romo paused and kind of smiled, and he said, over the years, yes, but not recently. Then the officer attempted the HGN, or horizontal gaze nystagmus, the eye test. Romo, unclear on the instructions, failed to keep his head still during the test, even though he had asked for clarification. And again, the officer failed to effectively communicate what she was asking of Romo. The next test is the walk-in turn. The officer's instructions during this test were so poor that one of the male officers briefly stepped in to show Romo what it was that he needed to do. By this time, the officer was so exasperated that you can hear it in her instructions. You can hear it in her voice and in her tone. But Romo asked good questions, demonstrating that he had the normal use of his mental faculties. The last test is the one-leg stand. And even though Romo used his arms for balance, he didn't look down at his foot and count out loud like he was instructed to do. He did hold the position for 21 seconds. And after all, he is a tall man who had had at least 2 back surgeries. After all 3 tests were completed, officers asked Romo if he would take a PBT, or preliminary breath test, to which he refused, stating, "We're not doing that," citing legal advice. A preliminary breath test is a handheld portable test used in the field to help establish probable cause. We don't really see those a lot in Texas because they're not admissible at trial due to their unreliability. Now, what you do see in Texas is the actual breath test machine at the station. The breath test machine, different from the PBT or preliminary breath test, it's supposed to be routinely maintained and calibrated. The issue with the breath test is that the sample cannot be retested. So, personally, I would not trust the machine. But back to Romo. The refusal didn't end things. The officers went and got a warrant for a blood draw, which is exactly what happens in Texas when someone declines. No consent, no problem. They get a judge to sign off. But that takes time that people are eliminating alcohol. In this case, the blood was drawn, toxicology results haven't been released yet. But most entertaining, though, is that the body-worn camera footage shows Romo doing full-on yoga stretches and hip openers before participating in the standardized field sobriety test. At the end of the sobriety test, Romo asked, "Did I pass this test?" To which the officer asked him to turn around, put his hands behind his back. "No, I didn't." That's what he said. But remember, standardized field sobriety tests are not pass or fail. They're just clues as to potential intoxication. Also, Romo mentioned 2 previous back surgeries. This information puts the idea in the officers' minds that medication could be in Romo's system. Another reason that they would want a sample of his blood. Now, I'm not saying that Romo was on any medications. I have no idea. But as an aside, even though a doctor prescribes medication to you, if that medication makes you lose the normal use of your mental or physical faculties, you could be charged with, in Texas, DWI, driving while intoxicated. Finally, the funniest part of this story is that the young traffic officer had no idea who Tony Romo is. And kudos to him, because he didn't play that card. You know, like telling the officer, "I was just on the phone with the president." Ha! I can only imagine what the 3 stone-faced, poker-faced male officers were thinking as they were watching this investigation unfold. But with all the cameras these days, it's too late to go back. You can't undo it. In my professional opinion, based on the thousands of DWI videos I have watched, Romo looks good to me. I think he'll end up being just fine. And if I were Romo's defense attorney, I would argue a 4th Amendment constitutional violation of his rights. When they handcuffed him on the side of the road, they seized Romo's body. When they placed him in custody in the back of the patrol car and they moved him to the station, he obviously was no longer free to go. I mean, they had his car. It's more than just being detained. Romo was not free to leave. And even if he was free to leave, again, they had his vehicle. He could not just hop back in his truck and leave. And in Texas, our statute says a person is arrested when he has been actually placed under restraint or taken into custody by an officer arresting without a warrant. And whether it's Texas or it's Wisconsin, the Constitution of the United States is still the same and applies to us all equally. And remember, if you go to jail, call JL 713-201-6767.